Welcome, everyone, to episode 20 of Trend Talks Threat Research. I'm your host, Jon Clay, VP of Threat Intelligence here at Trend Micro. Sitting today in my home office here. I'm watching the dogs, so you might see some dogs walking around in the background. Hopefully that doesn't bother you. But in this episode, I wanted to cover our 2025 Cyber Risk Report. So if you're not familiar, Trend Micro obviously has been around 35 years defending against cyber threats. A couple of years back, we started to pivot a little bit more into the cyber risk area. So our cyber risk exposure management platform, Vision One, is now live and has been supporting our customers for a couple of years now. And this report focuses on a lot of the data that comes through that platform. So I wanted to share some of the highlights of that. I'll link to the full report in the show notes. So if you wanted to get more details, you can do that. But let's kind of get started. I'll give you some highlights. So again, this comes from our cyber risk exposure management, the data inside, all about risk. What are the top risks? And in fact, we give a full risk score, cyber risk score for our customers, where they can actually take a look at how is their risk score compared to peers in the industry, peers in their geolocation, peers by company size, whatever that is, what that is. But in 2024, so this is looking at all of 2024, the average CRI, Cyber Risk Index, was 38.4. So that actually is a medium risk at the lower end of the medium risk. It's a 0 to 100 scale that customers would get. But we started out the year at around 42.5 and ended at 36.3, averaged about 38.4, like I said. Now we break it out by region. So if you think about the highest risk region was Americas, followed by TIE for Europe and EMEA, and Japan had the lowest. Americas was 39.8, and Japan was 34.3. So obviously Japan is maybe a little more risk prone or risk aversion, so they do a lot more to try to lower their risks. And in the product, I'll talk about some of the mitigating controls that we offer our customers. What were the top ones a little bit later here, but certainly the good news is that it's a downward trend. So we're seeing our customers acting upon their risk scores and following the mitigation recommendations that we give them to start lowering their risk over time. And that's the goal, is to get them down to a point where they can assess and manage their risk much more effectively. Obviously, lower risk is more likely and conducive to less breaches, less attacks, successful attacks against their organization. When we look at the industries, by industry, the top highest risk industry was education, followed by healthcare, insurance, and construction. The lowest risk was financial services. So if you think about what we've seen over the last several years in terms of the breaches that have occurred, education, universities, K through 12, they tend to have, unfortunately, lower levels of competency, lower budgets for sure. So it's more difficult for them to secure. Whereas financial services, obviously, a lot of budgets that they can focus on, a lot of activities that they can do to improve their risks, and it shows up as part of this. When you look at company size, it's quite interesting. The small, medium businesses had the lowest risk, and the large enterprises had the highest risk. Now, that's probably attributed to the fact that bigger organizations have a much more complicated attack surface. They have to deal with more things. It's more likely multinational, so they're dealing with multiple regions, trying to deal with their risk. And so it's a little bit higher. In fact, it's quite a bit higher from small, medium businesses was at 31.7 on average for the year, whereas more than 10,000 users, it was at 44.2. So we're looking at about a 13-point gap there. So quite a bit of difference in risk there. Let's look at some of the risk top top risky events that we saw. So again, when you think about the cyber risk exposure management platform, what it does initially is it discovers the attack surfaces, all the different types of attack surfaces you have in your organization, and then through the advancements in AI and compute technology, we're actually able to assess and prioritize all of those attack surfaces, entities you have, whether it's accounts or devices or applications, whatever it might be. And we can give risk scores to that. So the top 10, we give a top 10 list. I only talk about a couple. Risky cloud app access was the biggest one. So think about accessing your cloud apps. What do criminals want to do? They want to do account compromise and access cloud infrastructures in many cases. That was the top one, followed by stale Microsoft Entra ID accounts. So obviously, when your accounts get stale, if they haven't been used for a while, maybe they should be removed and you haven't removed them. Those are open to, in a lot of cases, can be taken advantage of by the attackers out there. Lots of sandbox email threat detected. So when customers take an attachment in an email, send it to our sandbox, it discovers some malicious code in those attachments. Obviously, email is still one of the very top ways of attackers getting into the organization. So doing this type of thing can help the risk, lower the risk. And then some policy violations, MFA being disabled in some of the accounts. Those are some of the other risky events that we saw. In fact, when we look at counts, we had over 1 billion event counts for weak sign-in security policy where the MFA was disabled. So obviously, one of the things we've been proposing for the last several years for organizations to deter account compromise is to enable multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. And in a lot of cases here, we still see companies that are not implementing that. And in fact, they've disabled that capability, even though it is supported in Microsoft, for example. We also saw weak sign-in where password expiration was disabled. Passwords not even required in some cases. We had about 400 million of those found where this password wasn't even required on an account. Obviously, that's a major security violation, and obviously the risk goes up when we identify that. Strong password is disabled as well as another one, about 400 million detections, event counts of those. So let's also look at, we have obviously also, besides our cyber risk exposure management, we support that with a native XDR component. We also support third-party XDR solutions into the platform, but in this case, we saw possible OS credential dumping, data encryptions that impact behavior monitoring detection for built-in Windows tools was detecting things, impaired defenses. All of those are dealing with. Then when we look at top misconfigurations, so one of the things that we try to do for our customers to lower their risk is identify misconfigurations. Misconfigurations are a big way that attackers get around security controls and take advantage of security controls that have misconfigurations. The top one was web reputation settings not set. So if I'm an employee browsing the web, if I don't have web reputation enabled, I could go to a malicious website and get access to malicious code that could get downloaded to my computer there. Device control settings and endpoint security is not optimized. So in a lot of cases, what we see is companies not taking advantage of the latest advanced detection technologies, and it shows up in our misconfiguration process here. Endpoint security not supported. That's a big one because we actually can identify devices that don't have security controls enabled or cannot have security controls enabled. Obviously, the risk can go up if we find those, and we can even identify malicious code or exploits targeting those devices. Let's see, cloud misconfigurations, non-compliant AWS infrastructure configuration, non-compliant Azure infrastructure configurations we're seeing, non-compliant S3 infrastructure, access control to S3 buckets, common configurations are non-compliant for S3 infrastructure. So a lot of those, and it crosses, this is on the cloud. We see concerns, misconfigurations across the many platforms. So whether you're running Azure or AWS or even Google Cloud, we are finding misconfigurations in all of those. So this is an area that organizations really need to take notice of. And the nice thing is when you implement cyber risk exposure management, you're going to be able to get visibility into these misconfigurations in your cloud infrastructure if you set it up properly. Let's look at some of the risk events that we saw in home networks. So Trend Micro has a home network security product, and we have it in millions and millions of homes around the world. And so there was a couple of things. And the nice thing about this is actually we can see some of the attacks targeting home networks, but also if you are a work from home or you have work from home employees, you can get some idea of what is going to be targeting them. Number one, RDP brute force logins. Attacks. Bitcoin, Litecoin mining, so cryptocurrency mining is a big one for home networks. The criminals obviously don't want to invest in their own infrastructure to mine crypto, so they basically take it from others. And in this case, a lot of home networks are used to crypto mine for them. We saw Telnet default password issues, web HTTP invalid content length, cryptocurrency, again, mining, SSH brute force login attempts, quite a few of those as well. So thinking about those, a lot of brute force attempts to log into accounts because again, if they can get into an account, especially an account that has access to the business network from a work from home employee, that gains access into the account. So you want to look at that as well. Let's move on to some of the CVEs. So vulnerability research is an area that Trend Micro excels. We're probably the best vulnerability research company in the world. And that goes because of our pre-disclosure vulnerability research that is done through the Trend Zero-Day Initiative Bug Bounty Program. So they get lots of, over 2,000 bugs last year were disclosed by the ZDI, Trend Zero-Day Initiative. And that helps us identify new bugs and then we work with the vendor affected to make sure that they can responsibly disclose that bug with a patch and help them with the patch. But then on the post side, we also have a lot of researchers inside that look at some of the top vulnerabilities that are being actively exploited in the wild, and we reverse engineer and make sure that we have virtual patches. So for example, when a new bug comes into the ZDI, even before the patch is available from the vendor, we usually have a virtual patch available for our tipping point customers. So last year on average, it was about 3 months of pre-disclosure protection. But let's look at some of the top CVEs. So CVE 2024-21357, 30086, 30082, 30087 were all the top ones that had hits in our across our customer base with exploit attempts against those CVEs. A lot of those are related to elevation of privilege and remote code execution vulnerabilities that allow the attackers to gain control over the device where that vulnerability is located on, or that application is running. Lots of Microsoft vulnerabilities, unfortunately for them. We also look at average mean time to patch, and in 2024, when we look at it by region, Europe had the lowest at 23.5 days. So it took them on average 23.5 days to patch a vulnerability that they received. Japan was 27.5, Americas was about 29, and EMEA was about 33. So you can see about a 10-day difference between EMEA and Europe, which could, again, this is when you think about who is, when and how quickly can you patch? Obviously, Europe is taking it a little bit more rigorously than EMEA at this point. America's, though, is about 29, so it's almost 30 days. So it's almost a month now to patch a vulnerability. What that means, obviously, is that when there is an attack or when a new bug or a new patch comes out, in many cases, the adversaries out there will quickly create an exploit of that vulnerability and try to attempt to exploit it in the wild. That window has been shrinking for many years, and so we need to get this lower and lower and lower every year. And the good news with our customer base, a lot of our customers utilize our IPS technology. So when they have a virtual patch, and they, like I said, about 3 months ahead of the main patch, the nice thing is it gives them a comfort window so that they don't have to take move as quickly in patching a lot of these vulnerabilities because they have a virtual patch already deployed. Let's see, some other threats and activities we saw, notable uses of AI in cybercrime. So a lot of risks detected on the AI front. We are actually doing security for AI now, and we'll be, and that's fairly new in the platform. So it'll take us some time to get some numbers out of that. So I'm hoping next year, we usually publish this report bi-yearly. So next year, hopefully we'll have some good data to share with you on the risks associated with AI usage inside the organizations. On the ransomware front, Lockbit still is one of the top ones. A lot of affiliates are still there. The Lockbit code, though, is still available out there, even though they were arrested and they were disbanded. The code itself is still used quite often because it was a pretty good ransomware code. Ransom Hub, Play, Akira, Hunters International were all in the top 5 out there. So ransomware obviously is still a concern. We also list some notable APT campaigns, so adversary campaigns in the report. I'm not going to get into a lot of these because it take too long, but you can look at it get more information in the report. On the malware side, interesting, coin miners are still very prevalent and detections around the world. We also saw some info stealers, Powload, which is a loader out there, deloader, Downad. Downad's an interesting case. That was a vulnerability back in 2008 that got patched in 2008 because it's a worm. Worms don't die easily, so we still see there are obviously still infection sources out there that are propagating Downad. In 2025, we saw 30,000 detections, almost 31,000 detections of Downad. So, the lesson learned here is worms are tough to kill. They're tough to eradicate. They still are out there. The good news, these are mostly detections and not infections. So, CDI, I mentioned earlier, they had about 1,300 non-ICS bugs that they disclosed in 2024. They had 146 0 days disclosed. Now, 0 day in their reference is basically if a vendor decides not to put a patch out for a bug that we submit to them, we will what we call O-day them. So we still publish the information because it is a bug and it could be actively being exploited, even though the vendor may not realize it and others may not realize it. So we had 146 of those 0 days. We had 6 actual 0 days that were found in the wild prior to us detecting them. So we were able to close off those 0 days with a virtual patch and then working with the vendor to patch that. On the ICS side, we had 258 ICS bugs disclosed last year and 27 0-day ICS bugs disclosed. We give you a heat map in here that looks at ransomware attacks, malware detections, and detected email threats around the world. So I won't go into that, but you can certainly take a look at that in the report. So that's basically a overview of the report. Like I said, this is our 2025 cyber risk report, and we're going to do this twice a year, publish it twice a year. Hopefully you'll be able to gain some interesting information about it. If you're not using our cyber risk exposure management, it can still give you some good ideas of what to look for inside your organization in terms of lowering your risk of exposure to the adversaries out there. So, like I said, I'll link to it in the show notes so you can get access to that. But if you want, go to our research section of the trendmicro.com website, go under research reports, and you'll be able to find it there as well. So everybody, thanks very much for watching episode 20 of Trend Talks Threat Research. I'll be back in a couple of weeks to go over another research project that Trend Micro has published out there. But certainly give me a like or give me a comment on what you'd like us to see, what you'd like me to cover in a future episode. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe out there. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.